We have with us as a keynote speaker a visiting progressive from the state of Vermont, David Zuckerman, who was elected lieutenant governor of his state last fall after leading the Bernie Sanders-inspired Vermont Progressive Party for many years. And in his successful third-party candidacy against a conservative Republican, David played up his own past connection to causes and campaigns in line with this conference. And in addition, he is a working organic farmer who can be found on any Saturday morning in Burlington, Vermont, peddling his own vegetables in the state's largest farmers market. David is a graduate of the University of Vermont and a 20-year member of the state legislature. He helped lead the fight for the nation's first GMO labeling law and more recent efforts to legalize local cannabis production and sale in Vermont. Right. He also championed workers' rights, paid sick days, minimum wage increases, single-payer health coverage, and reform of the state's regressive tax structure. And these are all causes that many of us here in California have championed as well. And as my friend and colleague in the Richmond Progressive Alliance, Steve Early, who invited David to be here with us at this conference, as Steve tells us, Bernie Sanders has called David the most progressive lieutenant governor in the country. And so I am so honored I want to just let you know, I'm really honored to be doing a workshop later on this afternoon at 4:30 with David, and it's called Working Coast to Coast, Making Cities and States Sustainable Free from Oil Dependency. And tomorrow we have a house party. Many of you know I'm also running for California Lieutenant Governor as an independent. So I hope to be the second independent lieutenant governor after David. And we're having a house party that David's going to be speaking at, and we're going to hopefully raise some funds for my campaign tomorrow at 2 o'clock at Steve Early's house. So if people can make it, his address is 747 Lobos Avenue in Point Richmond. So hope to see you there. But right now, I am so thrilled that we have David with us as our keynote speaker. So without much ado, please join me in welcoming David to Richmond and to the stage. David.
Thank you, Gail. So I'll make my own makeshift podium here to put my papers on. So thank you so much for inviting me, Steve and Gail, for the introduction, and for all of you for being here these couple days, and not just here these couple days, but for the day-to-day work that many of you do around agricultural sustainability and practices that are regenerative, activism and democracy, and fighting for so many of the issues that we have in common that I'll get into in a moment. Because sometimes when I speak to a group like this, I think, why am I speaking to you any more than you speaking to me, when we are all in this together and we all have such different aspects of experience that we can really give to each other. And so a conference like this, to me, is about the workshops and the speakers, but also the in-between time where we exchange information, we exchange excitement, we exchange energy, so we can keep on the struggle and keep on the fight, which, you know, sometimes is a little bit feeling like it's uphill. And events like this help us obviously recognize that none of us are doing this alone. We're all in it together. And so I really want to thank you for the opportunity to be here, and thank you for the work that you're doing. I don't know that there's any other statewide official other than Senator Tester, U.S. Senator, that's also an organic farmer. So in introducing myself, I just want to say I'm also an organic farmer. I raise about 30 acres of organic vegetables. We raise about 1,000 chickens on pasture on our clover cover crops, moving them twice a day. And then we also raise organic pigs, raising about 70 piglets to sell in the spring. And then we farrow again in the fall and keep about 30 for raising through to the summer. And I am a bit of an opportunivore. I eat what's in front of me. I will admit that, because sometimes when you're on the run, if you're overly picky, you get hungry. And I can't go without food. I want to give you a little political background. I was a cynical young person. I still am slightly cynical, but not as much as I used to be. Going to the University of Vermont, and I was very involved in environmental justice and environmental activism causes. And I was a fairly privileged Boston area kid going to a very white state, white university, studying environmental studies and chemistry issues. And life was relatively smooth sailing. And I was pretty cynical about the political process and the two parties and corporate money and politics. And this is back in the early 90s. And obviously, that's gotten a lot worse. But I became interested in politics and electoral politics because of this person that now nobody is unfamiliar with, of course, which is Bernie Sanders, who was then congressman in Vermont. And he was an independent then, just as he is an independent senator now. And he was someone who simply spoke the truth, spoke his values, spoke his beliefs. He didn't hold back to try to sound politic for everybody and not ruffle any feathers, and wasn't taking corporate donations. And so I volunteered for him, and I was just someone who knocked on doors and registered voters and did the work that so many of you, I think, did in this last year and a half or two. And thank you for that, because what an amazing difference in this country with his having been in that race. And it opened my eyes, and I met a number of local people, much like the Richmond Progressive Alliance. There was an organization called the Progressive Coalition in Burlington, Vermont, that formed as Bernie was independent mayor in the 80s. And lo and behold, it was people that cared about affordable housing, that cared about workplace safety issues and dignity in the workplace, that cared about economic justice, that cared about environmental justice. We have a public electric utility in Burlington, one of the first in the country to be 100% renewable energy. It was a community of people that thought issues were more important than party. And that all was the group that was supporting people like Bernie and others. And a few years after volunteering for a number of people, they asked me to run. And in 1994, I did run. I lost for the State House by 59 votes, but that was the beginning. And I ran again 2 years later and won. And as Gail said, I served for 18 of the last 20 years in the House, and then in the Senate for 4 of those years. And then last fall, while we were all crying in our beers in November, or soda or juice or whatever you were crying into, I got elected lieutenant governor of Vermont. And so I was sort of celebrating, but I was also depressed. During that time, I also farmed for other people. From 94 to 98, I worked for other farmers. And in 99, I started my own farm, Full Moon Farm, with just a couple acres as a CSA, working at the farmer's market as well. And in 2000, met my spouse, Rachel, who I would be remiss if right now I didn't thank her to you, because she is at home, and she is both caring for our 11-year-old daughter while I jaunt off to California. She is also struggling with Lyme disease, which went 10 years undiagnosed, and we figured it out in about 2000, and we've been fighting to get her back since. She's probably now half the person she once was, which is success in that back in 2000, she was maybe about a quarter of the person that she once was. And she carries so much water and harvests so many vegetables and helps guide so many in our crew when I'm off at political events, fighting for GMO labeling, fighting for cannabis reform, fighting for workers' rights on dairy farms. And so really, without her, I would not be able to be the spokesperson I am, and the organizer I am, and the fighter that I am to work along with you. So I just want to thank her to all of you for that. And so in growing the farm, we grow about 30 acres of vegetables, and I was just at a conference in Burlington the last couple days, which was Catalysts for a Climate Economy, and much of the discussion was around regenerative agriculture and renewable energy and transforming, so many different aspects of our economy away from fossil fuels, working towards carbon sequestration, trying to reverse obviously the unfortunate direction that we're going right now, which obviously we are feeling all across the globe, from flooding in Southeast Asia to the fires out west here to the incredibly massive hurricanes that have nothing to do with climate change, apparently, that are happening in the south and southeast. And I have a slight comment to make that hopefully will not fall on its face. But we have Hurricane Harvey slamming into Texas. We have Hurricane Irma about to slam into Florida after devastating our Caribbean islands and other islands, and people just being destroyed and their lives being destroyed. And then we have Hurricane Jose, which frankly, by name, should be the most angry at the United States of any, but instead is going to magnanimously, hopefully, curve away and say, we don't need to destroy each other when we disagree with each other. And so hopefully that will spare most, although the people of Barbuda, I don't know what they did to deserve what they're getting, but we all need to be helping. And what I draw from all of these storms, and I draw from all of the appeals for help, and all of the scenarios, including hypocritical Texas senators that thought we shouldn't fund Sandy recovery, but we should fund Harvey recovery. But really, what we all have to recognize is that at some point, any one of us either currently are, or will be, or at some point in our past, either in this lifetime or in our ancestors' lifetime, were the receiver of injustice. And so no matter what, any one of us could have been, is, or will be the receiver of injustice. And if we don't each take the responsibility when we have the opportunity to thwart injustice, then we are only hurting ourselves. And that it is our obligation and our duty as people who are privileged to be able to come together, to have meetings like this, and privileged to generally have a roof over our head, to use that privilege to try to better our communities locally, regionally, nationally, and internationally. And sometimes that means sacrifice. But in the grand scheme of things, what many of us are sacrificing, whether we live in California or Vermont or Washington or Oregon, I've met folks from different places, we are so privileged when you look at the time eternal with respect to basic needs being met. Even when we're challenged, we are privileged compared to what most people have faced over the millennia of time. And we have opportunities to make change. We are living in a time when Bernie has reignited this incredible energy that's been settled down below the media radar screen, and it's exploded. We have the silver lining. There is a silver lining to everything. We have the silver lining of the Trump presidency, which is that people are waking up. People are waking up that democracy is not just voting every 2 years or voting every 4 years, but democracy is actually participation. Democracy is deliberation. But, it's about taking maybe 15 minutes a week. Maybe people here do more, but when you're talking with other people who may not participate much or might be cynical or might not be interested, say, if you find half an hour, 2 or 3 times a week to go for a jog or to go for a bike ride, or to go for a hike, or to go walk your dog, or to have dinner with friends, can you find 15 minutes a week for democracy? It's not a lot to ask, actually. If we think about the 4 million plus people that came out for the Women's March in January, who participated in a Women's March somewhere, right? It was a pretty powerful day. In Montpelier, Vermont, we had 20,000 people, which out here doesn't sound like a lot, but Montpelier only has about 6,000 people that live there. We shut down 3 highway exits. They closed them. People got out of their cars on the highways and walked into Montpelier. Per capita, we had the biggest march anywhere. I was lucky enough to be able to speak as a newly inaugurated lieutenant governor, but I looked out over that crowd, and I thought about the millions of people across the country and the world that were coming together and thought, we can do it. all of the weight of these challenges are not on any one of our shoulders. There are at least 4 million pairs of shoulders, and frankly, there's more people that couldn't make it because of work or weather or circumstances and family. There are millions and millions of us. And for instance, if each one of just those 4 million spends 15 minutes a week, that's 1 million hours a week of democratic action, whether it's picking up the phone and calling your city councilor, your mayor, your representative, your senator, federal or state. And if we get everybody to do that, we actually can make a difference, because those numbers do matter. You know, it's not that Obamacare is the best thing that ever happened. I'm for universal single payer, there's no doubt about it. But repealing Obamacare was going to be catastrophic for millions and millions of Americans. People spoke up, and we defeated that because people participated. And what we have to do is move from defeating bad things to promoting good things and making positive, effective change for people. And so, you know, that's what I believe in my farming practices, in my political practices, and really my family suffers the most because of time, but in our family as well. And if we do come together and we think about all the efforts really that we've unfortunately had to do, but what we've successfully done. You know, after Charlottesville, tens of thousands of people descended on Boston. Thousands of people all over the country spoke out. When the Muslim ban was proposed, people organically flocked to the airports, and I'm assuming that happened here as well, and said, no fucking way, right? And that didn't used to happen. Maybe for some of you from the 60s it did, but in my lifetime that hasn't happened. And so we have a new energy, and we have that opportunity. We have more young people engaged. We have more economically challenged people engaged. We have people of color engaged. We have migrant people engaged. It is everybody. And when we are all walking and working in the same direction, what we are going to be able to accomplish is really pretty remarkable. Whether it's transforming our agricultural sector towards regeneration and sequestration, whether it's changing our healthcare system, whether it's working towards raising the minimum wage and the fight for 15, these things weren't being talked about with the energy that they're being talked about today. And now's the time. It's time to take back our economy. It's time to take back our communities. It's time to take back our climate. It's time to take back our food security, our education, our law enforcement and justice system, which is currently an injustice system, and it's time to take back our democracy. Are you all part of that? Are we going to do that? So with this conference, this is a piece. Like I said, we had a conference like this in Burlington literally 3 days and 2 days and 1 day ago. So we do have an East Coast, West Coast thing going on, but it's happening everywhere. And if we write off communities or we write off states because of some color map that the media puts in front of us, then we are doing ourselves and we are doing those people an injustice. There are struggling people in every state that need a system that works for all of us, not just the few. And if we write off those states, we are writing off those people, and that's not appropriate. Frankly, I will say, Bernie would have won. And the reason Bernie would have won is that he resonated with working class people all across the country. And I would argue that the voting population that we lost in this election was, and this is going to be an apolitic thing to say, but it was the neutered white male. And that's the person who used to get out of high school, not get a college degree, and they could get a manufacturing job and have a middle-class up family to feel success. That is gone. The manufacturing world is moved on because corporate America for Wall Street has moved all those jobs overseas, and they're exploiting people for $1 or $2 an hour or $1 or $2 a day to make our shirts and make our clothes and make our phones and make our computers. Those jobs, unless we radically change our policies, are never coming back. And unless we work to make sure that what dignity is about being able to afford a basic standard of living and raising the minimum wage and making sure people have healthy food, we will continue to lose those voters. And so we have to recognize that we have to reach out to people that we don't always agree with, or that we think we don't agree with because of the way it's portrayed with color maps on paper, and recognize all that we have in common. We all want health. We all want a safe community for our kids. We all want a planet that our children are going to be able to grow and thrive on and not get destroyed by massive storms and fires. There is a lot more that we have in common than we have in difference. But they'll have you thinking we're all fighting with each other. And we can't allow that thought process to take over how we talk and how we think and how we work. And we have to think about that at the gas station when we're filling our car, if you're filling a car, unless you got an electric car, or maybe at the grocery store, or wherever you are, that striking up a conversation in line is not a bad thing to do. Don't just, the world of look down. Look at each other, smile, create new 3-minute friendships, put out the energy that you want to receive. Those are the little things that over time are going to snowball into bigger and bigger positive things. Say hello to the person on the street who is on unfortunate times. Don't ignore them. We have to bring our humanity back. And we bring that back through food. We bring that back through a smile. We bring that back through political action and forcing politicians to do the right thing by being vocal and by being active and by doing 15 minutes or 30 minutes or 40 hours, whatever it is that fits in your time budget. But it is critical that you budget that time for democracy, because otherwise they're going to run roughshod all over us. And we now have this opportunity. People are reawakened. I mean, Bernie went to Kentucky and had thousands of people in Mitch McConnell's backyard talking about health care. If Bernie can do it, so can we in our own little way. That guy has more energy, and I'm missing his birthday cruise today, by the way, to be here with you. He does a birthday bash on a ferry out on Lake Champlain with a band, and everybody dances, and it's a lot of fun. So that's what I'm sacrificing to be here to talk to you all. But he's almost 80, and he is still traveling all over the country trying to make change. So if he can do it, all of us have to do our piece. And we have to recognize that it's the people in this room and the 4 million people that were at the Women's March and the millions of other people that aren't in this room, where if we each just take a little bit on our shoulder, it's a manageable amount. And just remind yourself of that when you get down and another ridiculous tweet comes out, that A, it's a ridiculous tweet, right? Just start with that and let that just smile for a minute and be like, okay, this is not reality. This is a tweet. A. B, this person does not live in reality, has no connection to common people whatsoever. Even if he uses the word love all the time, he doesn't know what the word means because he wouldn't be using it the way that he does while taking the actions that he does. And we can either be depressed and angry and downtrodden over it, or we can look around this room, or we can look around the picture in our mind of this room and the people that we farm with, or the people that we work with, or the people that we know in our families, or the people that we don't know that we know are out there, and gain that energy from each other to keep on fighting. So I thank you for the opportunity to be here. I've been asked to leave a few minutes if there's a question or two, but it gives me energy to come here and see all of you and know that it's not just the little isolated place of Vermont where I feel so lucky to live with such a concentration of dedicated, positive people, but to come out to a place like this and say, great, there are more concentrations, and these concentrations are everywhere. And so thank you for the opportunity to be here, and thank you for the knowledge you're going to impart upon me throughout the rest of today as I'm here at other workshops, and then maybe if we get to chat at the panel that I'm on later with Gail. So thank you for being here, and I'd love to answer any questions if there's a question or two. Please.
Hi, Pamela. I'd just like to say that the 53% of American women who supposedly voted for Trump were about half of the 26% of actual American voters who voted for him, of which less than 40% actually voted of the whole country.
Right.
so there's extreme fatigue and boredom and apathy about voting at all or getting involved in the political system at all,
Yep.
which is rigged by metadata, companies hired from England to parse all the statistics of where somebody like Trump could actually win, you know, in the electoral system. And you know, the kind of rigging that's going on globally, even not just in the United States, against organic farming or ownership of land and so on by the Eric Princes of the world and the corporations now consolidating more and more, like Syngenta and Monsanto, et cetera.
Right.
I think, you know, of course, all the good feelings and the goodwill and the yes, let's all do it together is fine, but how do you beat a rigged system like that? And that's
Sure.
really
Okay.
driven by massive amounts of money.
It is. So there's no doubt that there are tremendous challenges ahead of us. I would argue you beat the system from the bottom up. You build the roots, you build the soil, just like organic farming. You're going to get a much healthier system when you start at the bottom. And you know, I did not become lieutenant governor overnight. It's been 20 years. I never thought 20 years ago I was going to be lieutenant governor of Vermont. I thought I was speaking out too much and too far on issues like GMOs, on marriage equality, on raising the minimum wage to ever climb politically. I was just going to work at the local level and fight and see what change I could make. And that's what's happened. And it turns out I got to go up. But we have to take over at the local level, just like the Progressive Alliance here and others are doing in communities around the country, because you can do it at the local level without as much money. You can still door knock and have the human connection and talk to people face to face at the local level. We are not going to flip a switch. I mean, the fact that Bernie did as well as he did is remarkable, given the money and the rigging of the system and everything else. And if he chooses to run again, he's going to cream the field, right? First of all, he's going to go in thinking he can win. So we'll have bases built up and offices in parts he didn't think he could win, but also his name recognition is just so far beyond what it was. But you don't just start at the top. We've got to do it from the bottom. You've got to think about running for a commission seat or a city council seat or a school board seat so that in our schools we teach true U.S. history from, you know, a Howard Zinn perspective like I was lucky enough to have, even in a public system. But as long as we're teaching American white male history that dominated the world without any reality of the effects of what that was and all the other people that were involved and all the people that got slaughtered and all the people that got run over and all the roles of all the powerful women that were involved that aren't in these books. If we don't change our teaching of history to the truth, you know, so we can do it, but it's got to start at the bottom. We're not going to win at the top money-wise. What's that?
The legal system that's rigged by the Koch brothers, you know.
Well, sure. So we can just give up. I mean, so she said, you know, the rigged system by the Kochs and others. I believe we can change it. I mean, I have spoken out on some pretty major stuff, and people have attacked me. And in my campaign for lieutenant governor, in one ad, I was a racist thief and so forth. But by having worked for years with people across the state of Vermont on GMO labeling, on marriage equality, on raising the minimum wage, on sustainable agriculture, people knew me. And so the ads didn't work as well. And so it's got to be done from the ground up. Yeah.
Hi. As you know, so many states are starting to embrace the soil carbon issue. In California, we have the Healthy Soils Initiative, and Hawaii has the new Carbon Farming Task Force. So, and Maryland has passed a bill. And in the state of Vermont, there is probably the most progressive bill of all that was introduced by farmer Jesse McDougall for regenerative agriculture. And I'm just wondering how likely you think it is to be passed in the next session in Vermont.
Sure. I know Jesse, and I think it's exciting to have the conversation about regenerative agriculture. I actually served on the Senate Agriculture Committee the prior biennium when that was brought up. And I will actually tell you that I was not overly supportive, okay? And the reason is, as an organic grower who's gone through the GMO labeling fight, and what GMO labeling has meant in terms of now consumers who actually think GMO-free is more important than organic, not recognizing even that organic already was GMO-free and also had many other practices far more beneficial to the earth than GMO-free, which is conventional chemical agriculture in most instances, that it also wasn't ready yet. There were 2 or 3 farms that wanted certification. And the cost to the state, which would have also meant a $10,000 certification fee, would have been impossible for a 2 or 5 acre regenerative farm to cover. And so really, like organic, I think we have to build the movement of regenerative ag to a far more mature place before we actually have government all of a sudden starting to define what regenerative ag is. Because once government defines it, there's much less opportunity for it to grow and mature as an entity. And I would argue even with organic agriculture, and I think this is the last question, I apologize, sir, I've been told, is that regenerative agriculture, organic, that in organic agriculture, we're still fighting around the issue of soilless agriculture. And we've got this big meeting in October, if Florida still exists around Halloween, around soilless organic agriculture, which is currently practiced by Driscoll's and others, and has the opposite of soil regeneration. It doesn't use soil at all. It's totally out of sync with what holistic organic farmers think organic agriculture is. And we're fighting just to maintain what organic agriculture is. And so I think for a lot of consumers, creating another label and another term, I just don't think we're there yet. We need to build that from the grassroots first. And I would close by saying, with respect to that, and with respect to organic agriculture, and with respect to soil sequestration and growing crops in a more comprehensively holistic way, it is often more expensive. And as we work to do agriculture in this way that is regenerating our planet and cleaning our air of the overpopulation of carbon molecules, we absolutely have to, and this is probably the #1 lesson I learned from Bernie back in 1992. If we don't deal with economic injustice, we will not win environmental justice, period. Because when only 3% or 5% of the population can afford to buy food at the real cost of food production, we will never take over the food supply system. So unless we spend some time working towards the fight for 15, towards universal health care, towards affordable housing, we will lose the environmental battle. Thank you, because just as GMO labeling got defeated here by their using lying propagandic ads saying it was going to cost people more, because a study said, if you buy organic food, it's going to cost you $400 more. They just said, it's going to cost you $400 more. And you lost millions of votes from that lie, because $400 was a big number to millions of people. And so until we deal with economic injustice, we will lose on environmental justice and social justice and others. So I hope people remember we're all in all of these fights together, and I know many of you already think that. Thank you again for the opportunity. I look forward to chatting with you more some later today.